for healthcare workers and essential employees during the pandemic. I'm Basil John reporting in Washington, why lawmakers want to include this in the next stimulus package.
I'm Morgan Wright in Washington. Coming up, why Congress is taking aim at ramping up production of COVID-19 tests and personal protective equipment. All the details ahead.
As coronavirus cases continue to grow, so does the need for protective equipment for those on the front lines. I'm Kellie Meyer reporting from Washington, what Congress is doing to help and why civilians are taking matters into their own hands.
I'm Raquel Martin in Washington. U.S. farmers say they're being ravaged by the coronavirus pandemic, why the federal government is rushing to bring them relief. I'll have that full story coming up.
I'm Alexandra Limon in Washington. The FTC says if you're getting emails or phone calls promising to help you get your stimulus checks faster, it's a scam. Coming up, I'll have all of the accurate details you need to know.
During this economic downturn, our nation's veterans may be even more prone to economic hardship than most other Americans. I'm Joe Khalil here in Washington. We're going to show you how veterans advocate groups and Congress are both working together to try to address that.
Nurses, doctors, medical technicians who literally put their lives on the line to try to keep us safe.
Virginia Senator Mark Warner is one of many lawmakers who want to see hazard pay made available to healthcare workers battling the coronavirus.
We need to do more than applaud. We need to find a way to give them a little more compensation.
A plan being discussed would give up to $25,000, not only to healthcare workers, but to other essential employees.
I also think, though, you can make a case that the person who's checking you out at the grocery store, or you're picking up your drugs from at the pharmacy, or the sanitation worker could be viewed as a frontline worker as well.
This plan, also known as the Heroes Fund, could be part of the next coronavirus relief bill being prepared in both the Senate and the House.
The more exposure you get to the virus, the sicker you're going to be. And these are folks that are around it all day long.
Virginia Representative Don Beyer is calling for quick action. However, Virginia Representatives Bobby Scott and Abigail Spanberger want to keep focused reducing risks by supplying more protective equipment.
The reason there's a discussion of hazard pay is because we need to be ensuring that every healthcare worker has the personal protective equipment that they need.
And the solution to that ought not be hazard pay. The solution is to make the workplace safer. We can do that.
Negotiations like these will continue until lawmakers return to Washington later this month. Reporting in Washington, I'm Basil John.
We're going to continue to need the PPE equipment badly.
Democratic Alabama Senator Doug Jones says as cases in his state continue to grow, so does the need for resources for healthcare workers on the front lines.
We got a long way to go when it comes to personal protective equipment.
What do we want? PPE! As some healthcare workers demonstrate for more gear, some Americans are stepping up to help.
Every single one is like, I can't not sew for them.
TV director turned mask maker Hillary Cohen has turned her home into a sewing studio, creating 500 homemade masks since the crisis began. Now she's calling on people from around the world to join her for a 12-hour sewing marathon this Saturday. Cohen says you could use fabric lying around the house or a spare bed sheet to pitch in. Republican North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis says the actions of people like Cohen are not only heartwarming, but important.
That will sustain the day-to-day operations in states like North Carolina while we reserve a portion of the stockpile to be ready for a hotspot if it emerges. Hopefully it won't.
Tillis says a new $1.3 billion grant was approved with the third relief bill to help healthcare centers across the country get more PPE.
Just keep pinning.
But until that money arrives, people like Cohen stand ready to sew.
People coming together in a time when we're apart.
Reporting in Washington, I'm Kellie Meyer.
Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy says our frontline healthcare workers still don't have the equipment they need to confront the pandemic.
The equipment is ending up where the price is the highest, not where the need is the greatest.
So Murphy has introduced the Medical Supply Chain Emergency Act, legislation that would require the federal government to take over the entire critical medical supply chain from manufacturing to distribution.
The federal government should be finding the equipment, purchasing it, and then distributing it to the places of highest need.
And New York Congressman Anthony Brindisi says he wants to make sure the shortages never happen again.
I think it's important to have those made here in this country because they're so critical during times of national emergency.
Brindisi has introduced a bill that would require medical manufacturing and the supply chain to support it return to American soil. And on this, Democrats and Republicans like Florida Senator Marco Rubio have found common ground.
I'll support anything that returns that capacity to this country.
Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal says while Congress is working on the legislation, the president should do more.
Appointment of a czar, in effect, or the use of the Production Act, and better, both at the same time.
Blumenthal says with lives at stake, the president and Congress should act now. Reporting in Washington, I'm Morgan Wright.
Our farmers are really taking it on the chin.
After a year of historic floods and crippling trade fights, Iowa Congresswoman Cindy Axne says the coronavirus was the last thing U.S. farmers needed.
Just a hit, one more hit.
People are just bleeding money.
Michael Nevue with the American Farm Bureau Federation says the pandemic has sent crop and livestock prices spiraling.
What would you do tomorrow if 40% of your annual income just disappeared? That's kind of the position a lot of these farmers are in.
And with the restaurants and schools shuttered, some farmers are even dumping their own goods.
They don't have a place to take it.
We've got to make sure that our farmers can weather through this.
In a tweet Thursday, President Trump called on U.S. Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue to expedite emergency aid to farmers hurting. In the last stimulus package, Congress set aside $9 billion in emergency aid to help farmers. But now lawmakers and the Farm Bureau say that may not be enough to ensure family farms don't go under.
They can't be left behind.
Illinois Congressman Rodney Davis says agriculture funding now is vital to protect the nation's food supply in the future.
Because if not, then we're going to see shortages, we're going to see high prices, and that's exactly what our consumers and our families don't need.
And Congresswoman Sherry Bustos says that funding must include ethanol producers who've seen demand slashed.
People aren't driving. Those are our corn growers.
Secretary Perdue says details on ag programs will be out soon. In Washington, Raquel Martin.
Scammers are working hard to take advantage of the coronavirus pandemic, sending emails, calls, and texts that appear to be from government agencies.
This is a call from the Social Security Administration.
They promise to help people get their stimulus checks faster.
Don't respond at all.
Monica Vaca, Associate Director of the FTC's Consumer Response Division, says don't click on any links in emails or on social media. Instead, go to irs.gov to look up accurate information.
Right now, there is nothing for people to do to make sure that they get their stimulus payment.
The IRS says its website will soon allow people to check on their payment status and confirm direct deposit information, but those options aren't available yet. Colorado Congressman Jason Crow says most people aren't required to do that.
If they have filed their tax returns online either in 2018 and 2019, and they already have their bank account information current with the IRS, then they should just automatically get those cash payments.
Payments are supposed to begin next week, but those without direct deposit may have to wait for paper checks in the mail.
The Treasury Department only has the ability to print 5 million checks a week.
The IRS website will provide people the option of adding new direct deposit information in the coming days. In Washington, Alexandra Limon.
Jarrett Dieterle with the R Street Institute says many Americans have been coping with the coronavirus lockdown by cracking a cold one.
People are stuck at home, obviously, so I think that they are happy to have a alcoholic beverage every once in a while.
According to Nielsen research, alcoholic beverage sales shot up 55% in the third week of March compared to the same week a year ago. Dieterle says that's because many states are temporarily relaxing laws on alcohol purchases.
Places like Virginia have started allowing distilleries to deliver and ship, which they couldn't do beforehand.
40 states and Washington, D.C. have declared liquor stores as essential businesses.
A lot of governments want to allow a hint of normalcy for a lot of people.
David Osgo is chief economist for the Distilled Spirits Council. He says the numbers say Americans seem to be hanging on to their ritual of an evening cocktail by bringing the bar home.
Recently, we've seen a lot of premixed cocktails, and that's really indicative of the fact that there are a lot of folks that previously might have gone to a bar or restaurant, but now they're serving themselves at home.
Which isn't good news for bars and restaurants who were hoping the happy hour crowd would do takeout.
They can do to-go cocktails, like that's great, but there's still no real substitute for them actually being able to have like the dining room presence.
So until we can kick the coronavirus, here's a toast to your health from the New American Happy Hour at home. In Washington, I'm Anna Warnicki.
During the current economic downturn, our nation's veterans may be more prone to financial hardship.
The veteran population is disproportionately negatively affected by the COVID virus.
Michael Lennington's the CEO of the Wounded Warrior Project. He says many veterans have gig economy or vocational trade jobs that can't be done from home.
Or they're, hourly employees. Many of them are on fixed incomes that don't file tax returns.
Thursday, the organization committed $10 million for wounded veterans who've lost their income. 10,000 families will get a one-time $1,000 check to help cover basic needs.
To make rent payments, pay their utility bill, buy food for their families. I mean, these stories are really, really poignant and difficult.
Some veterans even worry that accepting a stimulus check from the government will increase their income to a level where they're no longer eligible for VA benefits. It's something that Congress is now taking up.
We put in legislation to protect them from being disqualified from those programs.
But Congressman Mark Takano says stimulus benefits may also complicate many veterans' tax situations, especially those on disability who don't typically pay income tax.
This very special class of veterans really need the VA and the IRS under the Treasury Department to figure out a solution.
He says the Veterans Affairs Committee will continue to push all relevant agencies so no veteran loses any benefits. In Washington, I'm Joe Khalil.
You can see for the first time that in the United States, we're starting to level on the logarithmic phase like Italy did about a week ago. And so this gives us great heart that not only in specific places, but we're starting to see that change. Obviously, a lot of that is driven by the improvement in New York City. What we're seeing is we're united in social distancing. And that's been very encouraging to all of us. And it should be encouraging to the healthcare providers that are on the front line, many of which are serving our Americans with such dignity and respect and ensuring that everybody gets optimal care. It's really about the encouraging signs that we see, but as encouraging as they are, we have not reached the peak. And so every day we need to continue to do what we did yesterday and the week before and the week before that, because that's what in the end is going to take us up across the peak and down the other side.
This is the end of the week, that famous week that we spoke about last weekend, in which what actually was predicted to happen happened. We're starting to see the leveling off and the coming down that Dr. Birx had mentioned. But it's important to remember that this is not the time to feel that since we have made such important advance in the sense of success of the mitigation, that we need to be pulling back at all.
Nationwide, the number of new cases per day is flattening, substantially suggesting that we are near the peak and our comprehensive strategy is working. Over time, our guidelines to slow the spread are decreasing. the rate of new cases very substantially and will result in fewer hospital admissions, and we're seeing that. It's incredible. I think with no exceptions, it's looking like it's lower. We're going to have an announcement on the World Health Organization sometime next week. As you know, we give them approximately $500 million a year, and we're going to be talking about that subject next week. We'll have a lot to say about it. We'll hold it. This past week, which was 4 active days on the stock market, Good Friday today is not included. The markets are closed. In 4 days, we had the biggest stock market increase that we've had in 50 years. That tells you that there's a pent-up demand. That tells you they want to get back. There's something good going to happen. I really believe that. There's something very good going to happen. We have to get back. So think of it in this horrible period, this horrible, dark period where this monster came and worked its horrible, horrible spell over the world. 184 countries as of this morning. 184 countries. We've done well, and I guess the market thinks we've done well because we had the biggest stock market increase without one day. We're talking 4 days instead of 5 that we've had in 50 years. 50 years. Think of that.
We now see nonprofits that traditionally help weak governments coming in to substitute for our national government.
The wealth of a person doesn't matter if you're getting into a severe illness. We ought not to let people die in our country that we can save.
Samaritan's Purse setting up tents in Central Park was an absolutely stunning development. And good for them that they stepped into the breach. But what a statement it is.
I want them to put their resources and their efforts towards the large chunks of the world that are going to also be dealing with a pandemic that won't have the resources that America does. And so the fact that resources from these organizations are coming to the US is, on one hand, helpful to Americans, but pathetic in terms of what it says about American responsiveness.
We're not accustomed to responding to the hospitals, which are typically very well resourced and run sophisticated operations. We have 6,164 in this country. We are getting calls from now over 1,000 in the United States that have heard that we may be a channel for these types of materials, and we are doing everything we can for everyone we can with what we have.
FEMA, the military, what they've done is a miracle. What they've done is a miracle in getting all of this stuff. What they've done for states is incredible. And you should be thanking them for what they've done, not always asking wise guy questions.
Enormous pressure is coming on top of something that had gaps in it already. I think that emergencies have this equivalent to the fog of war that they talk about, where you need to move fast at scale, but without good information on which you can make these judgments and move fast. Direct relief essentially is a backup to the backup. And I think if Direct Relief or any other nonprofit finds itself in a position to help people at risk of death, of course we're going to respond.
I'm scared for people not to touch me, people not to get close to me. I'm scared for other people too. They're right too close. Well, we New Yorkers, we don't listen. That's the problem. You want to practice social distancing, but it's like there's a lot of people on the train and you got to be where you got to go. It's hard. If it's totally full, I try to wait for the next train because I'm not trying to contact no virus and give it to the people at home.
Everybody's very scared. They're trying to keep their distance from each other, but it's impossible. If there's a lot of homeless people on the trains and you're supposed to do social distancing, so either you gotta wait for the next train or you gotta go to a different cart. So that's my main issue so far. It's really hard right now. It's really scary. I mean, if I got to do a level of 1 to 10, right now it could be at like a 9. So, but I have to keep on doing what I have to do.
For decades, we have been talking about all the health disparities, the structural systemic inequities that exist in our communities that unfortunately always emerge in moments of crisis.
Be into like week 4 almost of it, you know, it's starting to hit home. It's hitting people that we know, people that we grew up with and went to school with.
Most of my communities, I have family all over Chicago. We have these conditions: diabetes, sickle cell, high blood pressure.
This federal government has known that we have separate and unequal societies within our communities. And anytime we are hit with anything, those communities that live in the separate and unequal parts are going to feel it in ways that are not equal to those who have, you know, very comfortable living conditions, for instance. For those who have built up a comfortable financial reserve, for instance. For those who have more secure health insurance and employment, for instance. I pray and hope that in one way, the silver lining in this moment is that we have a collective realization that now more than ever, we need to intervene with a visionary type of will that leads to true sustainability and equity in all of our communities.
Thank you so much. Yeah, all right, I'll get that to her and her mother, yeah, because they're both actually out of work and everything.
You got high trust funds for Easter.
Thank you. Right now, no work, no income. I'm 60 years old. I got a 13-year-old son. I got a wife that's on disability.
No problem. All right, take care. Have a happy Easter.
The anxiety is people who are out of work that before this event have been able to feed their families, and now they have no income and they're concerned. You know, they have to meet mortgage payments, although that's been extended, but still there's a lot of anxiety, and I think it's food anxiety. It's, you know, how are we going to meet and feed our families? So that's the need we're addressing.
Now my hours are cut to 3 days a week. So that's less income for me, and I live alone. So between the mortgage, the car payments, and everything else, it's going to be tight. So good thing the stimulus check is coming.
And this year, well, the coronavirus is causing innovation in a way we did not plan for or expect. This is now our 4th Sunday that we will be offering, solely offering an online worship. And so our whole congregation has had to adapt and learn how to Zoom. We've had to learn the technology. We've learned on the fly how to mute everyone so we don't get a lot of background noise coming in.
To all the viewers and all the listeners, in Jesus' name.
Well, he did it live from the church with just the musicians there, no members. And we've shown it on video through Facebook. And we had a dial-in line where people could dial in, the people that didn't have a computer or a way of looking at the video. My technical folks, they did some rewiring of the system and were able to get more clarity with the picture. But until we get the internet upgraded, it's not going to be of high quality.
We've been educating our congregation. Almost every week there's something on the screen saying, hey, this is how you can give, text this number, and it can be as easy as that. That's just an essential lifeline, I imagine, not only for our congregation, but I'm just thinking about other congregations who might be entirely new to this. They're on a much steeper curve to figure out how to receive the funds they need to continue to operate.
A lot of the members may be a little skeptical about it. Since it's online, do they trust it? How's the security on it and all of that? But like I said, the vast majority of our members are pretty local. they'll either mail it in or they'll come to the church and drop it off.
We must seek and trust God. God bless you all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled